Welcome to This Explainer. We're diving straight into what feels like a geopolitical thriller today. Picture this, the sleek, high-stakes world of Cold War-era nuclear physics crashing headfirst into the lush, vibrant reality of tropical agriculture. It sounds totally made up, right? Like a Hollywood script? But this weird, wonderful intersection of atoms and Alphonso mangoes is 100% real history. In 2008, the world's most powerful democracy and its largest democracy signed a deal that changed the balance of power in Asia. But the key to the nuclear vault wasn't held by a general. It was held by a 300-gram piece of fruit. I mean, just think about the gravity of that for a second. We're talking about a 300-gram piece of fruit that literally broke a 20-year nuclear stalemate between the United States and India. So let's jump right into Chapter 1, the biosecurity wall, spanning from 1989 to 2005. To understand why this massive biosecurity wall went up in the first place, we have to look at the enemy. And the enemy here is microscopic. We're dealing with Bactrocera dorsalis, a highly destructive fruit fly, along with the mango seed weevil. Back in 1989, these tiny pests triggered a strict, comprehensive ban by the USDA. And to be clear, this wasn't some kind of petty political protectionism. It was an absolute biological necessity to protect multi-billion-dollar American domestic agriculture, especially the super vulnerable citrus industries down in Florida and California. Because of that ban, the Alphonso basically became the forbidden fruit. For 18 long years, the U.S. went entirely without it. Now you might be wondering, well, why couldn't they just wash or chemically treat the fruit before shipping it? Here's the catch. Traditional chemical fumigation or heat treatments completely destroyed the fruit. It ruined that signature creamy texture and all those complex aromas, causing chilling injuries that made the delicate Alphonso absolutely useless for the premium market.
But the momentum to break this ban was quietly building from the ground up. If we look at the timeline here, stretching from that total block in '89 all the way to the 2005 Bush-Singh Civil Nuclear Initiative, the massive geopolitical shift was actually driven by private advocacy. Everyday people, like a Pennsylvania dentist named Dr. Bhaskar Savani, were relentlessly lobbying Washington just to highlight the cultural importance of this mango. That private grassroots push slowly built up the diplomatic momentum that eventually gave us the historic U.S.-India 123 agreement in 2008.
Which brings us to Section 2, the Grand Swap, Atoms for Alphonso. This is where the mechanics of the international reciprocity get really interesting. On one side, the U.S. is demanding Euro 3 emission waivers. Why? Because they wanted to sell heavy Harley-Davidson V-twin motorcycles in the Indian market, and they needed to bypass local rules that were originally meant for tiny commuter bikes. In exchange, India's demands were crystal clear: lift the 1989 mango ban and push through the 123 nuclear agreement. Just imagine the contrast there, trading loud, heavy American steel for the delicate integration of India into the global non-proliferation community. It's wild to think about.
But to actually push a massive swap like this through, the politics had to be, humanized. The nuclear deal was facing intense opposition from non-proliferation hardliners in the US and plenty of skeptical politicians in India too. So in March 2006 in New Delhi, we get this brilliantly choreographed moment. President George W. Bush samples an Alphonso and casually tells the press it's a hell of a fruit. That single, highly publicized soundbite essentially humanized a very controversial nuclear deal. It tied the abstract success of international security to a very visible, very tasty victory for Indian agriculture. All right, moving into Section 3, the science of sterilization, or the 400JY protocol. The crucial takeaway here is this massive number, 400 gray, or GY for short. This is the exact minimum absorbed dose of ionizing radiation required to induce sterility in those quarantine pests we talked about earlier. It was a totally revolutionary technical solution. This marked one of the very first times the USDA actually accepted ionizing radiation instead of harsh chemicals to quarantine a major imported fruit. Let's walk through exactly how this cold industrial process works, step by step. It's a highly regulated, four-part systems approach. First up, you have the orchard pre-clearance inspection. Then, step 2, a post-harvest hot water fungicidal dip at 52 degrees Celsius. That handles fungal pathogens that radiation alone simply won't kill. Step 3, the mango gets blasted by that 400 gray of irradiation. And finally, step 4, it's packaged in a 1.6 millimeter insect-proof mesh to make absolutely sure no pests can get back in. This whole cold processing method is brilliant because it perfectly preserves the volatile aromatic compounds and all the sugars of the Alphonso. Now let's talk money. If you've ever wondered why a 12-count box of these luxury mangoes retails for upwards of $100 in the US, the economics are fascinating. Interestingly enough, the high-tech irradiation treatment itself is actually pretty cheap when you do it at scale. The massive price spike comes almost entirely from air freight, loading up heavy, highly perishable fruit and flying it from Mumbai to JFK or LAX eats up 45 to 60% of the total cost. That massive logistical hurdle completely insulates the domestic market, ensuring the Alphonso stays a highly exclusive luxury good. And that leads us right into Section 4, the 2025 document crisis and beyond. Fast forward to May 2025, and this whole delicate system basically hits a brick wall. 15. That is the number of entire mango shipments that were outright rejected and completely destroyed at U.S. airports in a single month. And the fallout? A staggering $500,000 in losses for the exporters. But here's the most frustrating part. It wasn't a pest outbreak. It wasn't some scary failure of the radiation technology. It was caused entirely by a simple PPQ 203 clerical error. USDA-appointed inspectors basically failed to properly write down the dosimeter measurements back at the facility. So because of a paperwork discrepancy, perfectly safe, beautifully irradiated fruit had to be tossed in the garbage under strict customs rules, which obviously sparked a whole new diplomatic row. To make sure that never happened again, the 2026 interim agreement stepped in. It shifted regulatory oversight away from physical USDA inspectors on the ground in India, handing the reins over to India's National Plant Protection Organization. The whole goal here is to completely eliminate that paper-heavy bottleneck and finally digitize an antiquated supply chain based on mutual trust. But actually, scratch that. Paperwork isn't the real villain anymore. The true threat to the Alphonso crop today is the climate. As you can see, we're looking at a devastating 85% supply reduction. Erratic flowering and unseasonal heavy rains in the Konkan Belt have absolutely decimated the harvest. That means only a tiny 15% fraction even survives to be exported. This kind of climate-driven shock could easily spike landed prices in the U.S. by another 50%, making the fruit rarer than ever before. Which leaves us with a pretty heavy question to ponder. Can a geopolitical alliance built on agricultural swaps survive the climate reality of tomorrow? We've seen firsthand how mango diplomacy bridged a massive nuclear chasm, proving that huge strategic trust can actually be built on small, flavorful concessions. But as the king of fruits faces a hotter, much more unpredictable world, we really have to wonder if our institutional resilience can weather the coming storms. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. I hope this deep dive gives you a completely new perspective the next time you spot a tropical fruit at the grocery store. Keep learning, and I'll catch you next time.